Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Sixpath Weeb, and today we're diving into another exciting chapter of our fanfic journey. In this video, we'll be continuing our exploration of Naruko featured in Fairy Tail, and it's time for part 3. Before we jump in, just a quick disclaimer, all content here is for entertainment and discussion purposes. I do not own any of the anime footage used. Huge thanks and credit go to the original creators and copyright holders. Alright, let's get into it. Magnolia Town, home to the legendary Fairy Tail Guild, was bustling with energy. The town was filled with vibrant activity, and currently, 3 mages and a blue exceed were making their way to the guild. Lucy was filled with awe at the sight of the lively town, but soon her expression changed to one of complete shock as she stood before the doors of the famed Fairy Tail Guild. Naruko smiled at the blonde girl. "Are you ready, Lucy?" she asked, placing a hand on the door. Lucy nodded eagerly. "Yes, I am." Naruko gave a nod before she kicked the door open, and Natsu marched ahead, heading toward another guild member, a skinny man with black hair and buck teeth. "Hruff. Where did you get your information?" asked the fire mage. "Why, Natsu? I heard you went overboard again," replied the rodent-like mage. Natsu gritted his teeth before landing a solid kick to Hruff's chest, sending him flying across the room and impacting the wall at the far end of the Great Hall. Soon enough, one of Fairy Tail's famous brawls erupted, with punches and kicks flying in every direction. Naruko grabbed Lucy and both ducked under a chair that flew towards them. The blonde dragon slayer quickly escorted Lucy over to the bar, one of the safest places in such a chaotic situation. "Hey, Naruko," said Mira Jane, spotting the blonde. "Hey, Mira," replied Naruko, smiling. Mira Jane smiled while cleaning a glass. "So, who's this?" she asked, pointing at Lucy. Lucy went from zero to fangirl in 2 seconds, gushing at meeting the poster girl for the guild, Mira Jane Strauss. "Oh my, you're Mira Jane. It's such a pleasure to meet you," Lucy exclaimed, stars in her eyes. Mira Jane giggled at her antics. "Yeah, nice to meet you. Lucy." Lucy Hertfilia, Lucy introduced herself. Naruko laughed as others, not participating in the brawl, approached. "Hey, Naruko," said Gray, approaching in his usual state, topless, though unfortunately, as the Ice Mage introduced himself to Lucy, he was completely naked. Subconscious stripping, Naruko joked with a grin. Lucy blinked for a moment before she screamed and smacked Gray in the head with her suitcase, knocking him to the ground. Naruko laughed at the predicament Gray had found himself in yet again. Lucy noticed several other guild members. One was a girl seated at the end of the bar, drinking what appeared to be a barrel of alcohol. She was Kana Alberona. Another member was Myra's brother, Elfman, who was shouting about the qualities of being a man until he was knocked out by a table smashing over his head. Suddenly, a boy of average height with spiky orange hair slid next to Lucy and took her hand, gazing lovingly into her eyes. "I'm Loke," he said, introducing himself. Lucy," she replied, confused by his sudden attention. Loke smiled but, almost as soon as he appeared, was gone. The orange-haired boy had seen her spirit keys and hurried off, much to the confusion of everyone else. Lucy looked at the brawl still raging on. "So, is this normal?" she asked. Mira Jane nodded, cleaning yet another glass as an object came flying out of the brawl and struck the silver-haired barmaid in the head, leaving a nasty gash. However, the wound didn't seem to bother her in the slightest. At that moment, a loud voice bellowed over the noise of the fight. All eyes turned to the diminutive figure of Makarov Dreyer, the guild master of Fairy Tail. "Enough, all of you," shouted Makarov. Every Fairy Tail member stopped fighting and turned to look at the master, who held a large stack of papers in his hand. "Stop this fighting at once," shouted Makarov. "Do you all have any idea how many complaints I've received about your antics? Stop breaking stuff." The master finished with another shout. "Come on, master, it's only a few broken things," Natsu replied. Makarov responded by throwing some of the thick wad of papers straight into Natsu's face. The heavy pile knocked the fire dragon slayer to the ground. Gray burst out laughing at Natsu's predicament while both Lisana and Happy helped him back up, their eyes still spinning from the impact. "Natsu, you broke a town," Makarov sighed as he placed a hand over his eyes. The guild lowered their heads in shame at their antics. But then, Makarov threw the pile of papers into the air and blasted them into tiny pieces. The guild cheered, and Makarov smiled. "Just try not to break anything else, alright?" said the master before retreating back to his office, leaving the guild to return to its mild-mannered state before the brawl. At that moment, Romeo, the young son of guild member Mikau, rushed toward Makarov, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Master, have you seen my dad?" he asked. "Romeo, your father is on a mission. I'm sure he will be fine," replied the master. "But master, it's been 4 days since he left." "Something must be wrong," cried the boy. Makarov sighed. "Romeo, enough. Your father will return, but you will just have to wait until that time. Is that understood?" said the master. Romeo, tears streaming down his face, clenched his fist in anger before landing a solid punch on Master Makarov's cheek, much to the shock of everyone watching. The anger quickly left his body, and Romeo took off running out of the door. "I'll just have to find him myself," shouted the boy. Natsu, having witnessed the entire thing, swiftly followed Romeo out of the door, dragging Lucy with him. Just as they passed the door, Naruko appeared and handed the pink-haired boy a slip of paper from the request board. Natsu smiled in thanks and took off at great speed with a flailing Lucy screaming behind him, followed by Happy. Naruko then re-entered the guild as Master Makarov stepped toward the blonde, smiling. "Naruko, that was a good thing you did there," said the master. Naruko shrugged in response. Natsu understands more than anyone what it's like to lose someone close to their heart. He would be the best person to help look for Mikau. "Besides, it gives Lucy her first mission as well," said the blonde. Makarov simply smiled and nodded before retreating to his office. Naruko made her way to the bar, where Mira Jane placed a drink in front of her. "What was that paper you gave Natsu, Naruko?" asked Mira as she cleaned a glass with a bar rag. "The mission request Mikau had accepted," replied Naruko, taking a big gulp of her drink. "Why?" asked Kana, who was propped up against the bar, clearly having had a bit too much to drink. "As I told the master, Natsu knows what it's like more than anyone to lose someone close, and who better to show Lucy the ropes than him," said Naruko. "You're joking, right?" slurred Kana before she passed out against the bar. Both Mira Jane and Naruko laughed at Kana's antics. "Well, I'm going to find a spot to train." "Thanks again, Mira," said Naruko, finishing her drink. "Bye, Naruko." Mira waved as the blonde disappeared in a flash of light, leaving the guild behind. Naruko reappeared in a secluded, empty training ground. The area was covered in grass with thick groves of trees dotted around. Naruko's white trench coat fluttered in the stiff breeze. She extended her arm as a small magical seal appeared in her palm. Naruko closed her hand and pulled, and her katana appeared sheathed in its scabbard. Naruko swiftly drew the blade with a simple flick of her thumb and turned, just as a shadowy figure rushed toward her with a sword drawn. Naruko blocked the strike with ease. "You're going to have to do better than that," Naruko said, parrying the strike and knocking the figure back, revealing the shadowy figure. Titania. The new arrival was none other than Erza Scarlet, the fabled fairy queen and sword-wielding armor-clad S-class mage, known all over as Titania. Erza smiled as she spun her twin blades in her hands, clad in her everyday Hartkreuz armor. "Do you really want to see my best, Naruko?" Erza responded. Naruko smirked at the redhead. She was often amazed at how Erza had grown into this powerful young woman, capable of overcoming so much, even with the hardships she had suffered, hardships Naruko had helped her with all those years ago. "Well, Erza-chan, why don't we make this interesting?" said Naruko with a smile. Erza returned the smile. "What did you have in mind, Naruko?" she asked. "No armor, no dragon slayer magic, or other weapons. Just steel versus steel to see what's what. How does that sound?" asked the blonde. "For the winner?" Erza inquired. "To be granted one wish, as long as it's not illegal." "You're on." Erza smiled and rushed toward Naruko, bringing her blades to bear against the blonde. Naruko responded by blocking the initial strike and moving to the right, then ducking under the second blade as it sailed overhead. Naruko brought her blade down from above as Erza crossed her swords in an X to block the strike. Naruko tightened her fists around the handle of her katana, bearing more weight into the blade. Erza gritted her teeth, feeling the immense strength of Naruko. She knew from previous training bouts that Naruko's physical strength was incredible, and her magical power only amplified it. Erza swept her crossed blades in an arc to the right, as Naruko's katana dug into the dirt below. Erza spun, delivering a back kick to Naruko's chest, sending her skidding across the ground. "You got lucky there, Erza-chan," said Naruko with a smirk. "I prefer to call it skill, rather than luck," Erza replied. "Then allow me to show you my skill." Naruko disappeared in a flash and reappeared behind Erza's left shoulder, her sword ready to strike. Erza ducked under the attack as Naruko disappeared in a flash. Erza's swords passed through the spot where Naruko had just been. Naruko then reappeared directly in front of Erza, swinging her blade toward her waist. Erza moved to block, but before she could react, she was sent skidding across the dirt by the power of a kick from Naruko. "Had enough yet, Erza?" Naruko shouted. "Nope. I thought as much," murmured Naruko, smiling as she awaited Erza's next attack. It was an attack Naruko didn't have to wait long to defend. The sword-wielding redhead blazed forward with blades at the ready, but Naruko deftly avoided her strikes. Naruko jumped back into a grove of trees, an idea sparking in her mind. She swiftly slashed with her blade, cleaving a nearby tree clean from its trunk. Spinning her body, she used her strength to kick the tree toward the advancing Erza. The Fairy Queen responded in kind, cleaving the tree in two, the separate halves passing by her. Steel clashed, sparks flying from each blade as the two S-class mages fought for dominance. Naruko smiled as she gripped Erza's right wrist, pulling her closer, their faces nearly touching. Naruko's grin widened as a blush crept across Erza's face at their close proximity. "Are you ready to give up, Erza-chan?" Naruko whispered. Erza stuttered, well." She replied, flustered. Naruko leaned in closer, their lips nearly touching, causing Erza to relax her arms, distracted by the blonde. But just as Erza thought Naruko was about to kiss her, Naruko swept her leg behind Erza's, knocking her flat on her back. Naruko quickly pressed the edge of her blade to Erza's throat and smiled as Erza found herself pinned to the ground. "That was a low blow, Naruko," Erza hissed, struggling against Naruko's firm grip. "All is fair in love and sparring, Erza-chan," Naruko replied with a grin. Erza smiled before disappearing in a burst of speed, putting some distance between herself and Naruko. Erza smirked before her entire body was bathed in light, using her requip magic, the night to summon one of her many armors. Naruko smirked as she sheathed her sword, watching the feisty redhead reappear in her Heaven's Will armor, its gleaming metal wings shining in the sunlight. Surrounding her were dozens of winged swords, all aimed at the blonde. "Erza, that's cheating," Naruko shouted. "You cheated first," Erza retorted. "Did not. Did too. Did not. Did too." Naruko grinned. "Hey, if you cheat, no cake for a week." Erza's head drooped, a shadow forming over her eyes. "No one touches my sweets. I mean, no one touches my precious cake," she screamed as she launched her blades toward the blonde. Naruko responded by summoning a yellow aura of energy around her body. She opened her mouth, yellow lightning gathering as she called out, "Lightning Dragon's Roar." A bright beam of energy rushed toward Erza, overtaking her blades thanks to her impressive speed. Erza managed to avoid the beam, which shot harmlessly into the sky. With her speed, she rushed toward Naruko, dropping from the sky with her sword at the ready. Naruko, too, rushed in, lightning energy gathering around her fist. The two S-class mages converged at high speed, their sword and fist clashing with a powerful cry. Lightning Dragon's Raging Fist. Trinity Sword. The attacks collided with tremendous force, sending both Naruko and Erza flying backward, skidding across the ground. Their armor and lightning energy faded away, carried by the wind. Suddenly, loud laughter filled the air as Naruko sat up, looking over at Erza, who did the same. The redhead smiled as Naruko walked over and helped her to her feet. Erza blushed when she met the blonde's steady chest. "That was an amazing spar, Erza-chan," Naruko whispered. "It was, wasn't it?" Erza replied, bringing her lips closer to the blonde's. Just as they were about to make contact, a shout broke them apart. Naruko turned to see Gray, Lisanna, and Elfman rushing over. "Hey, are you two all right?" asked Gray. "We felt the magic and thought you might be in trouble," said the Ice Mage. Erza blushed while Naruko just sighed. "We're fine, guys. Just a friendly spar," Naruko said with a smile. "Of course you were sparring, just as one should," Elfman cried in his usual gruff voice. Elfman was quickly knocked to the ground by a solid punch from a still blushing Erza. "Shut up," she grumbled before stomping away. Gray and Naruko chuckled at Elfman's current unconscious state, while Lisanna just shook her head at her brother's antics. The group of mages followed the angry redhead back to the guild, with Naruko dragging the larger Elfman by the leg. By the time they arrived back at the guild, it was filled with rapturous applause, as Natsu, Lucy, and Happy had returned with an injured but alive Mikao. Above the main festivities, on the second-floor balcony accessible only to S-class mages, Naruko stepped up and leaned over the railing, smiling at Erza. "It seems we fought to a draw," Naruko said, looking down at the party below. "Indeed," Erza replied. "So, I propose we settle this with a request each. Sound good?" Naruko asked. Erza nodded. "All right, you first." "Would you like to have dinner with me?" Naruko asked, her ocean blue eyes meeting Erza's warm, chocolate brown ones. Erza blushed fiercely at the blonde's request before replying, "You mean like a date?" Naruko nodded with a grin. "I would love to," Erza replied. Naruko's grin grew wider. "All right, what's your request?" Erza smiled with growing confidence as she leaned in close to Naruko's ear and whispered softly, making the lightning dragon slayer shiver, "I'll let you know after our dinner date." With that, Erza pushed herself away from the blonde with a playful sway in her hips, much to Naruko's rapt attention, which Erza found amusing. Naruko broke into an uncoordinated, happy dance before leaping over the railing and landing softly on the ground. She grabbed Natsu in a headlock, ruffling his hair playfully, much to the guild's amusement and Natsu's irritation, as the party continued long into the night. Because, when you're a member of Fairy Tail, every day is a celebration. It was another bustling day at Fairy Tail, with mages chatting and going about their usual activities. Some were gathered around the request board, eagerly looking for their next assignment, while behind the bar, wearing her usual red gown, stood Mira Jane Strauss. Her gaze was focused on the blonde dragon slayer, Naruko, who appeared to be having an enjoyable conversation with Gray, Elfman, and Lisana. Mira Jane couldn't help but smile as she thought back to a time years ago when she almost lost her family. It had been a trying moment, and it was only thanks to the brave Naruko that they had been saved. The Strauss siblings, Mira Jane, Elfman, and Lisana, had just completed a mission and were collecting their payment from the employer when Elfman led his sisters to a secluded spot at the edge of town. He was eager to show them what he believed was his perfected full-body takeover. "Ni-chan, please be careful," Lisana exclaimed, as the sky above darkened and a few raindrops began to fall. "Don't worry, Lisana. I've got this," Elfman reassured, puffing out his chest confidently. Mira Jane, arms crossed, stood watching her brother as he prepared to demonstrate his power. She could feel the surge of magical energy emanating from him. Elfman took a deep breath and called out his transformation. "Beast Soul Takeover." Suddenly, Elfman grew in size and strength, his body covered in crimson fur, his chest remaining green. 4 horns protruded from his shoulders and head, and a fierce beard adorned his face. His wide, sharp-toothed grin was more beastly than ever, and his torn trousers barely clung to his waist, secured by a leather belt. Lisana and Mira Jane smiled at their brother's accomplishment. He had been working hard for months to reach the level of full takeover. "You did it, Ni-chan." Lisana cheered. But Mira Jane's smile faltered as she sensed a sudden spike in her brother's magical energy. A jolt of fear ran through her. Elfman had lost control. "Lisana, get away from him now," Mira Jane shouted, her voice filled with urgency. Lisana turned just in time to see Elfman charging toward her. Fear flashed in her eyes as she took a step back, but the shadow of her transformed brother loomed over her. "Ni-chan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Lisana," Mira Jane cried out. Mira Jane rushed to her sister's side, pulling Lisana into her arms just as Elfman slammed his fist into the ground, causing the earth to crack under the force of his blow. Mira Jane skidded to a stop, Lisana safe in her arms, but Elfman was closing in quickly. "What's wrong with him?" Lisana cried, her voice panicked. "He's lost control. We need to snap him out of it," Mira Jane explained, her tone desperate. Mira Jane took to the air, trying to keep her distance, but Elfman responded with another mighty swing of his fist aimed directly at them. Mira Jane quickly threw Lisana to safety and narrowly avoided the powerful blow, which struck the ground with terrifying force. Mira Jane landed hard, sliding across the dirt, but she quickly pushed herself up to see Elfman charging toward Lisana again. "Lisana," Mira Jane cried, her voice filled with worry as she struggled to reach her younger sister. Lisana, trembling, was trying to crawl away from Elfman, but the roar of the beast shook the earth beneath her. "Ni-chan," Lisana whispered, tears welling in her eyes. It was in that moment that a memory resurfaced in Lisana's mind. "If you're ever in trouble, if you find yourself alone and scared, just hold on to this, and you'll be okay, I promise," Naruko had said, smiling as she placed a silver pendant necklace over Lisana's head. The pendant was in the shape of a flying bird. Lisana had hugged Naruko tightly, grateful for the gift. "Thank you, Naruko-chan," she had said, her voice full of warmth. Now, Lisana's hand instinctively reached for the pendant beneath her shirt, gripping it tightly. She closed her eyes as Elfman's massive fist came rushing toward her. "Ni-chan," Lisana whispered. "Lisana!" Mira-Jane screamed, her heart pounding in her chest. Elfman roared as his fist came crashing down, but then, a flash of light appeared between them. As the light faded, a familiar figure stood before Lisana, her white trench coat fluttering in the wind, an outstretched hand holding back the punch. It was Naruko. "Oi, Lisana-chan, are you okay?" Naruko called out, her smile as bright as ever. Lisana's eyes widened in surprise as she saw the blonde dragon slayer standing before her, unharmed. "Naruko-chan," Lisana whispered, relieved. Mira-Jane, from a distance, watched in astonishment as Naruko appeared. "Naruko, he's lost control. You need to stop him, but please, don't hurt him," Mira-Jane called out. Naruko's ocean blue eyes sharpened as she turned her focus to Elfman, who was still roaring angrily. "Lisana, go to your sister now," Naruko urged, her voice calm but commanding. Lisana nodded, quickly rushing to Mira-Jane's side as Naruko prepared to face Elfman. Naruko's entire body was surrounded by a yellow magical glow, her energy crackling as Elfman slammed his fist down toward her. Naruko met the attack head-on, her magical power surging as she responded with a powerful counter. Lightning Dragon's Raging Fist. With a swift motion, Naruko knocked Elfman's fist aside and sent him flying backward with the force of her lightning-charged punch. The impact left Elfman dazed, but he quickly regained his footing, roaring and ready to fight again. Naruko smirked, her confidence unwavering. She rushed toward him, her body enveloped in lightning energy as she leapt into the air, her speed leaving a trail of yellow light behind her. With a powerful strike, she hit Elfman square in the chest. "Lightning Dragon's Missile," she shouted. Elfman was sent crashing to the ground, but Naruko was ready for the next move. She landed gracefully, poised for action, as Elfman slowly got back to his feet. Mira-Jane and Lisana, watching from the distance, exchanged worried glances. "Where did Naruko come from?" Mira-Jane asked, her voice full of curiosity. "I don't know," Lisana replied, still clutching the pendant. "I just held onto it like she told me to, and then she appeared." As the battle continued, Naruko deftly dodged Elfman's powerful attacks, her movements swift and precise. She called out to him, hoping to reach him through the chaos. "Elfman, please listen to me. I don't want to hurt you. Just calm down," Naruko pleaded. She ran up his outstretched arm, flipping over his head and landing a few paces away as Elfman gave chase. Naruko's voice rang out as she prepared to make her final move. Lightning Dragon's Roar. A massive beam of lightning energy shot from Naruko's mouth, hitting Elfman square in the chest. The force of the blast knocked him back, and Naruko quickly appeared in front of him, landing a punch to his cheek that sent him crashing to the ground. As Elfman's transformation began to fade, his eyes no longer spiraled with wild energy. His body shrank back to its normal size, and he slowly returned to his senses. Mira-Jane and Lisana rushed to his side, relieved to see that he was no longer a threat. "Elf-ni-chan," Lisana cried, rushing to her brother. "Elfman," Mira-Jane added, her voice filled with both relief and concern. Naruko, standing a short distance away, watched them with a quiet smile. She had saved the day once again. Naruko smiled as she sensed a shift in the air. Her magic had alerted her to Lisana's danger, and thanks to the teleportation seal she'd placed in Lisana's pendant, the bond between them had guided her straight to where she was needed. She was able to reach her just in time, and now, there she stood, smiling at the heartfelt reunion. Suddenly, a figure collided with her chest, followed by another and then another, as all the Strauss siblings enveloped her in a massive hug. "Thank you, Naruko," said Mira-Jane, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Thank you, Naruko-chan," cried Lisana, hugging her fiercely. Elfman lifted all three of them off the ground, returning to his usual jovial self. "Oi Naruko, you're a true hero." "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, though a hint of comic tears still streamed down his face. Naruko chuckled, the warmth of the moment settling in. After Elfman gently set them back on the ground, she gave each of the siblings a bright smile. "Shall we head home?" Naruko asked. The siblings agreed, and together, they began their journey back to Magnolia, back to the guild, back to family. Their family. Mira-Jane was brought out of her memories by the sound of Kaina's voice, waving her hand from her usual spot leaning against the bar. "Oi, Mira-Jane, lost in dreamland again?" Kaina teased, a slight drunken haze in her voice. Mira Jane gave a small laugh but shook her head. It was at that moment she spotted the blonde dragon slayer exiting the guild, the same dragon slayer who had once saved her family. She watched as Naruko waved goodbye to the Strauss siblings before heading out, and Lisana and Elfman approached the bar. "Hey, Ni-chan," said Lisana happily. "Hey, you too," Mira Jane replied. "Was that Naruko I saw leaving?" she asked. "Yeah, she said she needed to be somewhere," replied Lisana. Mira Jane looked at them, confused. "Did she say where?" "Nope, sorry," shrugged Lisana. Elfman, holding a drink, offered his take with a playful grin. "I think she's got a date," he said, earning a quick slap from Kana. "Enough with the man talk," Kana said, chuckling. Lisana noticed Mira Jane's thoughtful expression and approached her. "Are you okay, Mira-chan?" she asked. Mira Jane nodded, a smile returning to her face. "I'm fine," she reassured her sister. "Let me clean up a bit before I head out." As she worked, the golden light of the setting sun streamed through the windows of the guild, casting a warm glow over everything. But as Mira Jane worked, her thoughts remained on the blonde dragon slayer with ocean blue eyes. Naruko smiled as she entered her apartment in Magnolia, not far from the guild. It was modest, with simple furnishings. The white walls and dark wooden floors gave it a cozy feel, while the symbol of fairy tale was proudly displayed on the wall above her leather couch. After removing her white jacket and tossing it over the back of the couch, she stepped into her bedroom, also simply furnished. A gloriously soft king-sized bed awaited her. After a quick change into something more comfortable, Naruko stepped into her ensuite bathroom. She admired her reflection in the mirror before stepping into the shower. The steam filled the room as the water heated up, and Naruko smiled to herself. Tonight was the night. Meanwhile, at Fairy Hills, the adjacent dormitories for the female mages of Fairy Tale, a redhead stood in front of her open wardrobe, wrapped in a plush white towel. She was deep in thought, unsure of what to wear for her date that evening. "What do I wear? What do I wear?" Erza thought nervously. Her subconscious chimed in playfully, "Naru-chan would probably like you even dressed in a sack." Erza couldn't help but smile at the thought, but she continued to search for the perfect outfit, determined to impress the blonde dragon slayer. Night had fallen over Magnolia, and many of the town's residents were enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. In the restaurant district, a tall blonde figure stood beneath a streetlight, awaiting his date. Naruko had dressed for the occasion in black trousers, black boots, a white collared shirt, and a knee-length woolen coat, perfect for the slightly chilly evening. A voice called out, and Naruko looked up to see her date approaching. Erza smiled as she reached out her hand, and Naruko took it with a smile of her own. "Erza-chan, you look amazing," Naruko said, genuinely impressed by her date's appearance. Erza, dressed in tight white jeans, black-heeled boots, a blood-red blouse, and a waist-length dress coat, looked as radiant as ever. Erza blushed but smiled back. "Thank you, Naruko. You look pretty good yourself." The two of them made their way to one of Magnolia's most popular restaurants, the Magic Circle. Naruko opened the door for Erza, and the two were greeted by Wyatt, the restaurant owner, who was also a good friend of Naruko's. "Naruko, my boy," Wyatt exclaimed warmly as he shook Naruko's hand. He then turned to Erza, lifting her hand and kissing it gently. "Ah, a true honor to meet the great Erza Scarlet," Wyatt said with a smile. Naruko chuckled as Wyatt led them to their private table. The restaurant buzzed with activity, but it was soon quiet as they entered a private dining room behind a velvet curtain. The two sat down, and as their waiter took their orders, Naruko noticed that Erza was a little nervous. "Erza-chan, what's wrong?" Naruko asked, concerned. Erza smiled and placed her menu down. "I'm just nervous," she admitted, her cheeks turning pink. Naruko gently reached across the table, taking Erza's hand. "It's all right. I'm nervous too," she said with a grin. "Let's just enjoy the evening. At least we don't have to cook tonight." Erza laughed, the tension easing as she smiled at Naruko. The two spent the next few hours enjoying their meal in each other's company. 2 hours later, after a wonderful dinner, Naruko and Erza left the restaurant and stepped into the cool night air, bidding Wyatt farewell. They walked hand in hand down the quiet street, chatting and enjoying the peaceful evening, until an unexpected voice interrupted. Well, if it isn't Blondie and his pet redhead out for a midnight stroll," Laxus Dreyer called out, mocking them as he was flanked by his companions, the Thunder God tribe. Naruko narrowed her eyes as Laxus arrived. It wasn't a secret that they didn't get along, and they had come close to an argument on several occasions, only for Master Makarov to step in and prevent things from escalating. I suggest you close your mouth, Laxus, before I make you eat my fist along with your words, Naruko said, her voice tinged with frustration, especially at the Lightning Mage's remarks towards Erza. Laxus smirked, unfazed by Naruko's words. Is that supposed to scare me or something? He replied casually. Erza stepped forward, her arm outstretched to block Naruko from taking further action. If this wasn't stopped, it might lead to a confrontation. Leave, Laxus, or I'll report this to Master Makarov, Erza said firmly, her eyes narrowing at the headphone-wearing mage. Laxus scoffed at the mention of his grandfather and signaled his companions to leave. As he walked away, he threw one last glare at Naruko. Next time, you won't have your friend to protect you, he sneered. Naruko returned the glare, unfazed. You'll be the one who needs protection next time, Laxus, she retorted, watching as he and his group disappeared into the distance. Both Naruko and Erza walked through the streets together, making their way toward Fairy Hills. Standing at the entrance, Naruko leaned in and gently kissed Erza's cheek, making the redhead blush deeply, causing Naruko to smile warmly. I had a great time tonight, Naruko-chan, Erza said, her voice filled with genuine happiness. Naruko smiled in return. I'm glad, Erza-chan. We should do this again sometime. Erza nodded, her expression thoughtful. Master has requested my help for a monster removal mission. I'll be gone for a few days, but when I return, I'll choose the theme for our next outing. Good night, Naruko-chan, she said, pressing a soft kiss to Naruko's cheek before heading inside. Good night, Erza-chan, Naruko replied softly. As Naruko turned to walk back home, she couldn't contain her excitement. Just as she passed the exit of Fairy Hills, she raised her fist into the air and jumped, feeling elated about the evening's events and the possibility of more in the future. She whistled a joyful tune all the way back to her apartment, only stopping when her head hit the pillow. This could be the beginning of something wonderful. The sun had risen over Magnolia Town, ushering in another bright day, and with it, the start of another adventure for a certain guild known throughout Fiore as Fairy Tale. Inside the bustling guild hall, various mages were arriving, looking for their next task. Among them was the guild's newest member, a celestial mage named Lucy Hertfilia. Lucy stood in front of the request board, tapping her chin with her finger as her eyes scanned the various job postings. From delivery tasks to protection details, she found herself uncertain about which one to choose. Just as she was deep in thought, a voice called out behind her. Hey, let me know once you pick a job, said Mira, the cheerful barmaid, as she walked by carrying a tray of drinks for the guild's tables. Lucy turned, slightly confused. Why? What's the rush? She asked. Mira Jane smiled as she set the drinks down on a nearby table. Because Master Makarov is away at the annual guild masters meeting, she explained. Lucy looked puzzled. A guild masters meeting? Mira Jane nodded. Yes. Every year, guild masters from all over meet to discuss matters like recruitment, mission requests, and everything else that keeps a guild running smoothly. All guilds are overseen by the Magic Council, which ensures they follow the law. If a guild causes trouble, the council has the authority to impose penalties or even disband them, she said, offering a thoughtful smile. Lucy's eyes widened. Wow. Mira Jane chuckled. There are 3 main types of guilds: legal, dark, and independent. Our guild is a legal guild, meaning we follow the rules of the Magic Council and cooperate with other legal guilds. Independent guilds are separate from the council but still follow basic rules. Dark guilds, however, are dangerous and unregistered with the Magic Council. They often operate like criminal organizations and can contain powerful mages. Lucy was stunned. Dark guilds? Mira Jane's expression grew more serious. Yes, dark guilds are not recognized by the Magic Council and can be very dangerous, she confirmed. Wow, Lucy said, genuinely impressed by the information. Mira Jane waved and made her way back to the bar. Lucy, still processing, turned her attention back to the job board. But just then, a loud voice interrupted her. Have you picked a job for us yet? Shouted Natsu, the pink-haired dragon slayer, his enthusiasm impossible to ignore. Not yet, Lucy replied, nervously glancing at him. Before she could respond further, another voice interjected. Why would you take a job with this baka? He's only going to break everything, came the sarcastic remark from Gray, who was dressed in his usual attire, blue pants and no shirt. Natsu growled in response, glaring at Gray. What did you say, stripper boy? He snapped. You heard me, flame brain, Gray retorted. At the bar, A tall, spiky-haired blonde mage in a white trench coat was still fast asleep, his head resting on the counter. His ocean blue eyes slowly opened as he heard the commotion coming from the end of the room. He wiped his face, blinking, before noticing Mira shaking her head at him. "What time is it?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "About 10:30, Kana slurred from her favorite spot at the bar. Naruko, the blonde mage, looked up just as Natsu and Gray continued to argue. With a sigh, she reached for 2 glasses behind the bar and tossed them toward the bickering duo. The glasses struck them both in the face, knocking them to the ground. "Keep it down over there," Naruko called out. "Baka." The guild members erupted in laughter as Natsu and Gray picked themselves up, embarrassed by the situation. Naruko, unfazed, returned to her stool and rested her forehead against her arms. Mira Jane huffed at Naruko's antics. "You're going to pay for those, Naruko-chan," she said, her tone playful. "Just send me the bill," Naruko replied, muffled by her arms. The guild hall was suddenly thrown into disarray when someone shouted that Erza had returned. Within moments, both Natsu and Gray, now acting like the best of friends, rushed to greet her. Lucy was surprised by the change in their behavior. The large wooden doors swung open, and a shadowy figure stepped into the guild. It was Erza Scarlet, a stern expression on her face, carrying an intricately decorated animal horn. She dropped it onto the ground with a thud and glared at the guild members. "I have returned, and the stories I've heard do not please me," Erza said, her voice filled with authority. The guild members, already familiar with her commanding presence, became nervous. "Wakaba, stop smoking. Nab, pick a job already," she chided her fellow guild members, who sheepishly complied. Erza made her way to the bar, where Mira eyed the large horn she had brought back. "Nice horn," Mira commented. "It was a gift from the village elders I saved from a monster that was terrorizing them," Erza explained, nodding over her shoulder. She then walked over to where Naruko was still half asleep, her hand gently resting on the blonde mage's head. "Naruko-chan, are you all right?" she asked softly. Naruko lifted her head, blinking sleepily. "Tired," she mumbled. Erza smiled and gently pressed Naruko's head against her armored chest, an unexpected display of affection that surprised the rest of the guild. "He gets a hug, and we all get shouted at," Wakaba whined, causing Mikao to console him with a laugh. Erza ran her fingers through Naruko's spiky blonde hair before suddenly shouting across the room, "Gray, Natsu, come here." The 2 mages rushed over, eager to avoid Erza's ire. Meanwhile, Lucy was astonished by what had just transpired. The entire atmosphere of the guild had shifted in an instant. She suddenly recalled reading about Fairy Tail, and recognized Erza as one of the guild's strongest mages. At the bar, Erza looked at Natsu and Gray, who were still trying to stay on her good side. Naruko, now fully awake, watched the scene unfold with a smile. "I need your help on my next mission," Erza said, her tone commanding. "You're all coming with me, including you, Naruko-chan." Natsu and Gray saluted her, eager to follow her orders, while Naruko, now fully alert, gave her a sleepy but affectionate smile as she followed them out. Lucy, still unsure of the guild dynamics, looked at Mira Jane, who smiled knowingly. "Lucy, you should go with them," she suggested softly. "Keep an eye on Natsu and Gray." Lucy nodded, now intrigued by what awaited her. "All right," she said, and followed the group out of the guild hall. Mira Jane watched them leave, a smile on her face. That could be the most powerful team in fairy tale history, she mused, just as Kana's head hit the bar in a drunken stupor. History was about to be made as Team Natsu was officially formed. The following morning at Magnolia Station, the newly assembled team had arrived, with Lucy sitting alongside Plu, a small snowman-like celestial spirit, and Happy, who was munching on a fish. They all watched as Natsu and Gray continued their argument from the previous day. "How is Mira Jane expecting me to handle these 2? Lucy asked, shaking her head. "Then why are you here?" Happy replied, his voice muffled by the fish. Lucy glared at the cat before noticing 2 new arrivals, Naruko and Erza. Naruko had changed her usual white trench coat for a black one, adorned with the fairy tale symbol on the left breast and the kanji for Koku no Arashi, Storm King, on the back. Erza, on the other hand, was struggling with a massive trolley packed with luggage, much to Lucy's surprise. "That's a lot of luggage," Lucy commented. "Oh, hello. I saw you at the guild yesterday," Erza said as she noticed Lucy for the first time. "Have you come to join us on our mission?" she asked with a friendly smile. Lucy jumped to her feet and gave a slight bow. "Yes. My name is Lucy Hertfilia, pleased to meet you. I've recently joined Fairy Tail," the blonde celestial mage introduced herself. "Welcome. I'm Erza Scarlet. I trust you've met the others?" Erza gestured to Naruto, who was smiling, and the best friends Natsu and Gray. "Yes, I have," Lucy said, returning the smile. "Don't worry, Lucy. You'll do great," Naruko encouraged, going over to Natsu and Gray, grabbing them both by their collars, and dragging them toward the train platform. The two were still arguing, oblivious to Erza's watchful eyes. The newly formed team boarded the train and found an empty cabin, taking their seats. As the train began moving, Naruko and Natsu, both dragon slayers, began to suffer from severe motion sickness. Being dragon slayers, they often struggled with traveling in vehicles. "So, Erza-chan, what's the mission?" Naruko groaned, slumped in her seat, much like Natsu, who was comforted by Erza slamming his head into her armored chest, much to Gray's amusement. "All right, when I was on my way back to the guild, I overheard some men talking about something called lullaby," Erza began, her expression serious. "At first, I didn't think much of it, but then they mentioned the name Irigor." Naruko's eyes widened, even in her queasy state. "Irigor, the Shinigami of Isenwald," she groaned. "Exactly," Erza nodded. "Wait a minute. Who's Irigor?" Lucy asked, confused. "He's a borderline psychopath who only takes assassination missions for the Dark Guild, Isenwald," Naruko explained. "He's someone we need to stop. I've asked for your help so we can go straight to the guild and deal with them as soon as possible," Erza said, looking at each of her guildmates. They all nodded in agreement. The train soon stopped at the next station, and the Fairy Tail mages stepped off, with Erza half carrying a still woozy Naruko, who was quickly recovering her strength after disembarking. As the train departed, they suddenly realized they were missing a member, Natsu. "Oh no. We left Natsu on the train," Lucy cried, pointing at the departing train. Happy agreed. Gray smirked and shrugged. "I don't see this as a problem," he said, chuckling to himself. "Come on, we have to get him," Erza said, running toward the exit of the station, with the others following close behind. Meanwhile, on the train, Natsu had regained consciousness after being knocked out by Erza's earlier action, only to find himself alone in the empty carriage. An unknown man, average in height with slicked back hair tied in a ponytail, sat across from him. Unaware that Natsu was still suffering from motion sickness, the man tried to strike up a conversation. "So, where are you traveling to, friend?" he asked, receiving no answer. "My name's Kageyama, what's yours?" he pressed. Natsu didn't respond. "Hey, don't ignore me," Kageyama growled. Natsu just groaned, too dizzy from his motion sickness to respond. Kageyama then stood up and raised his leg, slamming his foot into Natsu's face. "That'll teach you to ignore me," he snarled. Natsu, now jolted awake by the intense pain, jumped to his feet and glared at the unknown man. "Hey, what's the idea with kicking me?" Natsu growled, flames flickering around his fists as he prepared to attack. But the motion sickness hit him again. Kageyama laughed at Natsu's discomfort and placed his hand on the floor. 3 shadowy fists erupted from a dark magical seal, each one striking Natsu under the chin and sending him flying to the rear of the carriage, leaving him too weak to fight back. Kageyama stood tall, smirking at his victory. But just then, the train screeched to a halt, and the sudden jolt knocked Kageyama to the ground. Natsu, no longer affected by his motion sickness, jumped to his feet again, flames swirling around his hands as he launched a fiery punch at Kageyama. The shadow magic user was sent flying into the door of the carriage, his magical defense shattered by Natsu's attack, and the carriage was left in ruins as Kageyama fell to the ground. As Kageyama struggled to rise, an object spilled from his jacket, an ornate flute. Natsu's eyes were drawn to it, and he noticed Kageyama trying to get to his feet. Just then, an announcement came over the train's PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. The train will now resume travel to Kunigi Station. Thank you for your patience." With that, Natsu grabbed his luggage and jumped out of the nearest window as the train began to move. He landed lightly on the ground, and a magical 4-wheeled vehicle skidded to a stop next to him. Gray climbed down from the roof, and Erza hopped out from the driver's seat. "Natsu, are you all right?" Erza asked, walking over to the Dragon Slayer. "Yeah, I'm fine. Except some idiot attacked me," Natsu explained, rubbing his face. "Who was this guy?" Naruko asked, half hanging out of the vehicle's window, now able to speak after the vehicle had stopped. "I don't know, but he had this flute-like object with him." It seemed pretty important, Natsu replied, tapping his chin thoughtfully. Erza's eyes widened. Flute-like object? Natsu, what did he look like? She pressed. White jacket, ponytail, used shadow magic. The flute had a skull on top. Natsu rattled off the details. Erza growled in frustration and slapped the back of his head. Baka. He's a member of Eisenwald, the Dark Guild we're chasing, and you let him go, she snapped. What? Erza-chan, you knocked her unconscious, remember? She didn't hear your explanation about them, said Naruko with a smile, before Erza stomped over and thrust the palm of her hand into Naruko's forehead, pushing her back inside the car as Naruko groaned in pain from the hit to her head. Come on, we need to catch up with them, ordered Erza once again, taking control of the magical vehicle. Inside the vehicle, Erza drove at an intense speed, causing both Natsu and Naruko to groan once again from motion sickness. Lucy, struck by an idea after hearing Natsu describe a skull-capped flute, spoke up. Wait, I know what this flute thing is, she said. Erza turned her head to look at Lucy through the open front window. Explain, she ordered. It's called lullaby. It's said to be some kind of mass curse magic. Anybody who hears its song will have their soul removed for all eternity, said Lucy, much to the shock of the other occupants. Now that's exactly why we need to stop them, said Erza, pouring more magic into the vehicle as it sped up once again, racing in pursuit of the Dark Guild Eisenwald. Far ahead, as the train arrived at Kunigi Station, Kageyama stepped off and walked into the innermost part of the station. There, he met with the most feared member of Eisenwald, known as the Shinigami, Death God, Iriger. Kageyama reached into his jacket and pulled out the lullaby flute, handing it to him. Excellent, Kageyama, said Iriger, admiring the dangerous magical weapon. We may have a problem. Some fairy tale mages might be onto our plans, explained the shadow user. What? Whispered Iriger. On the train, I encountered some fairy tale mages, said Kageyama. Iriger didn't reply to the shadow user's statement. His only response was to pull his giant scythe from his back. With 2 swift strikes, he removed 2 small sections of Kageyama's ears. Kageyama growled in pain, a trickle of blood running from each small wound. We don't need anyone interfering with our plans, snarled the Death God. The plan will go ahead, and we'll have a surprise waiting for them at the next station. Let's go and finish this. Hi, Kageyama replied. The 2 dark mages made their way to another train platform, preparing for their next destination, where the entire Eisenwald Guild awaited their arrival. Meanwhile, Team Natsu raced toward the town of Ashibana, where they knew Eisenwald would be. Erza pushed the magical vehicle to its limit, and soon they arrived at the railway station of Ashibana town. Erza slammed on the brakes, bringing the magical vehicle to a stop outside the station. Gray slid from the roof as Lucy, Naruko, and Natsu exited the rear, the 2 dragon slayers shaking off the remnants of motion sickness. They were all shocked by what they found. The station was in partial ruins, and dozens of Rune Knights, the council police force, were unconscious on its steps. The fairy tale team rushed into the station, with Naruko and Erza taking the lead. As they navigated the vast train station, they soon reached the innermost part where the entire Eisenwald Guild was waiting for them. Well, isn't this a lovely surprise? Fairies who seem to have lost their way, mocked Iriger, noticing the fairy tale mages arriving. What do you plan to do with lullaby? Asked Naruko, keeping a careful watch on the Dark Guild members. Iriger laughed at Naruko's statement. I plan to play the song of lullaby through the station's PA system. I will destroy this town, for those who reside here have lost their right to continue living, said the Death God. We will stop you. That song will never be heard by anyone, snarled Erza. Iriger laughed again. You can try, little fairies, but you will lose. Eisenwald, destroy them. Wipe them from existence. He ordered before activating his wind magic and flying out of a nearby window, escaping. Kageyama was the first to enter the fray. Die, fairy tale! He screamed, launching a shadow attack toward Lucy. Natsu, now fully recovered from the motion sickness, recognized Kageyama's voice from the train. The fire dragon slayer moved at speed, standing in front of Lucy and batting the shadow away with fire-encased fists. Natsu, Gray, we need to stop Iriger's plans, ordered Naruko. The both of you, get after him and recover that flute, she finished. But what about the rest of these guys? Asked Gray. Erza and I will handle them. But you need to get moving, replied Naruko. The pair nodded, and Fire Dragon Slayer and Ice Make Mage ran in the opposite direction toward the exit of the station, while Naruko and Erza stood side by side, ready to face the Dark Guild members. Naruko turned to look at the redhead. "Are you ready to show them the power of fairy tale, Erza-chan?" she asked. "I was born ready, Naruko-chan," she replied. "Lucy, keep a safe distance back, okay?" "Happy, stay with her," ordered Naruko as the senior mage, giving out instructions. "Right," Lucy replied. "I," said Happy, perched on Lucy's shoulder. Naruko nodded, and an intense shroud of yellow lightning energy surrounded her, a fierce wind blowing through the station. Erza joined her fellow S-class mage, as a magical energy shroud covered her as well, with 2 winged swords appearing in her outstretched hands. The Dark Guild Eisenwald was about to face the power of 2 S-class mages, Fairy Tail's Koku no Arashi Naruko Uzumaki and the Titania Erza Scarlet. The battle began. The assembled members of Eisenwald laughed as they stared down Naruko and Erza, who stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting. Naruko's ocean blue eyes gleamed with determination, her power slowly rising as she prepared for battle. "Ha ha ha, the redhead's pretty cute," mocked one of the Eisenwald members. "Nah, I'll go for the gorgeous blonde at the back," said another. "Fairy tale mages are cute," added a third. Erza narrowed her eyes as she extended her hand, summoning one of her winged swords with a flick of her wrist, much to Lucy's surprise. Naruko followed suit as lightning energy surrounded her body, and she clenched her fists, her power visibly rising. "That's enough," Naruko growled, her energy flaring. "If you continue to insult Fairy Tail, I can guarantee that you won't see tomorrow." The Eisenwald members laughed at her declaration as they drew swords from magical seals. "Prepare to surrender, Blondie," one shouted. "You and your little redhead friend will kneel before us." "Fine, have it your way," Naruko replied, her shroud of energy growing brighter as she charged toward the dark mages at incredible speed. She raised her hands and clapped them together, calling out, "Lightning Dragon's Raging Thunder." A massive dome of lightning energy exploded from Naruko's hands, sending dozens of dark mages flying in all directions. Erza, following suit, swung her blade with precision, sending even more Eisenwald members flying. Naruko ducked under a punch from one of the enemies, quickly retaliating with a lightning-charged kick to his chest that sent him flying across the station, knocking several of his comrades with him. Naruko then turned, charging up her magical energy once more. Lightning Dragon Sword Horn. With a crash, dozens of dark mages were blasted away by the force of Naruko's attack, as she skidded to a stop, crouching low. Her black trench coat fluttered in the wind as she stood tall, her ocean blue eyes filled with unrelenting determination. Erza smirked at Naruko's display of power, clearly impressed with the destruction she had caused. Without hesitation, Erza drew another blade from the magical seal, and with 2 swift strikes, several Eisenwald members were disabled. Suddenly, 3 dark mages stepped forward, firing beams of light magic toward Erza. With a leap into the air, Erza avoided the beams and summoned a magical seal, exchanging her swords for a bladed staff. With deadly precision, she dispatched the light beam mages with ease. Meanwhile, Naruko was engaged in another part of the station, her leg swinging in a high arc, landing a powerful hit on a dark mage's face. The force of the blow sent him crashing to the ground. Naruko opened her mouth, a magical seal appearing in front of her face, and she unleashed a giant beam of lightning energy. Lightning Dragon's Roar. The station exploded with energy, and Eisenwald mages were left unconscious, sprawled across the ground. The sheer power of Naruko's attack left everyone watching in awe. Erza wasn't far behind, effortlessly switching back to her twin blades and cutting down even more of the dark mages. Soon, the defeated Eisenwald members lay scattered around the S-class mages from Fairy Tail. Those remaining hesitated, backing away in fear. "These two are monsters. What are they?" One of the dark mages trembled in disbelief. "I've never seen someone requip so quickly," he added, clearly amazed by Erza's abilities. From a distance, Lucy watched in awe, her eyes wide at the display of power from both Naruko and Erza. She marveled at how they had taken down almost the entire guild of dark mages in such a short time. "Wow, I've never seen anything like this before," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "That's only half the story," Happy chimed in. "Erza is special. Most sword mages can only summon their weapons, but Erza can summon multiple types of armor to aid her in battle. It's a magic known as the Knight, and it's the signature ability of Titania. As for Naruko, she's a dragon slayer of lightning, one of the most powerful mages. She's also the youngest S-class mage in Fairy Tail's history, even before Erza broke her record," the Exceed explained to a stunned Lucy. "Wow. Naruko smirked at the fear in the eyes of the remaining Eisenwald members. She knew this battle had taken too long. They needed to end this quickly and catch up to Iriger before his plans were fully set into motion. It seems there are still quite a few left, Erza-chan, Naruko said, small sparks of lightning dancing around her body. It certainly looks that way, Erza replied, a determined glint in her eyes. So, what do you think? Naruko asked with a grin. I'll set them up, and you knock them down. Sounds good, Naruko-kun. Naruko then vanished in a flash, appearing above the remaining dark mages. With a roar, she slammed her lightning-charged fist into the ground, sending a surge of energy rippling through the station as the ground trembled beneath them. The resulting blast cracked the ground beneath and sent many of the dark mages flying into the air. Erza lifted her head, bathed in a brilliant light, as she summoned one of her many armors. As the light faded, it revealed a gleaming silver armor with metal wings and twin blades. Erza hovered in mid-air, holding her blades in the wind. Dance, my swords, she commanded. A ring of deadly, winged swords circled around the red-headed mage, and with a swift slash of her blades, she launched a powerful energy ring towards the flying Eisenwald mages. The dark mages were shredded by the barrage, their defeated forms falling to the ground. However, one mage managed to escape the onslaught. He immediately recognized the two who had just decimated his guild and trembled in fear. My God, the Kuku no Arashi and Titania, we never stood a chance, muttered the rather plump mage as he fled, unaware that both Erza and Naruko had spotted him. Naruko reached down to her hip, spinning one of her silver guns around her finger and aiming it at the retreating Eisenwald mage. Heavy shot. A large magical bullet erupted from the barrel, streaking toward the dark mage and striking him in the back of the head. His eyes rolled as he collapsed. Following that, a spear thrown by Erza caught the fabric of his clothing, embedding itself in the stone wall and pinning him there, unconscious. Humph, amateurs, Naruko scoffed, holstering her weapon and surveying the chaos at Ashibana Station. Come on, we need to go after Iriger, Erza said, her armor sealing away as Naruko and Lucy joined her. The three fairy tale mages moved toward the station exit. Elsewhere at the station, Gray had split from his friend and rival Natsu. In his mind, he knew the best place to stop the lullaby song was at the station's broadcasting center. The blue-haired ice mage raced up the stairs toward the broadcast room, only to find it in ruins, the equipment shattered beyond repair. What the? He muttered, surprised by the destruction. Before he could process it, a shadowy figure descended from the ceiling. His upper body was covered in a yellow and black jacket with strange, black string-like appendages extending from his hands. The mysterious attacker swiped at Gray, who ducked and slid across the floor. Suspended from the ceiling, the dark mage smirked. Impressive, kid. But you fairies are becoming a nuisance, he taunted. Gray smirked back. It's in our nature to be a pain to fools like you. The man landed on the floor and stepped toward Gray. My name is Rayul, and we of the Eisenwald Guild will stop anyone who opposes us, including foolish little fairies like you. Gray glanced around the ruined broadcast room. If they want to play the lullaby here, this would have been the perfect place. His eyes widened as the 5-string-like appendages shot toward him. He dodged, but the equipment was destroyed in the process. What? He destroyed the equipment without hesitation. This wasn't their target, Gray realized. Rayul advanced again, but Gray quickly summoned his magic. Ice make, shield. A large ice shield appeared in front of him, momentarily blocking the strange attacks from the dark mage. As Rayul jumped back, Gray cancelled his shield and glared at him. If you're not planning to play lullaby here, what is your goal? Gray asked. Rayul smirked, his string-like magic returning to his hand. You fairies are so clueless. This was just a distraction. Iriger's using his wind wall to trap all of you in here while he finishes his work. Before Rayul could finish, Gray kicked him hard in the chest, sending him crashing through the nearest wall. Rayul landed in an adjoining room, while Gray stepped through the hole. I'm sure Iriger is already in Clover Town, taking care of the weaklings, Rayul taunted, readying his magic again. But his smirk quickly faded as Gray was covered in ice. The shroud shattered into dozens of pieces as Gray disappeared, and Rayul's breath caught in his throat when he felt a hand on his back. He turned to see Gray smiling. The only weakling here is you, Gray said as magical energy surged through his hand. He called out. Ice make, coffin. Rayul's face contorted in shock as ice rapidly enveloped his body, trapping him in a solid block of ice. Gray turned to the shattered broadcast equipment, frustrated that they had been so easily tricked by amateurs. He rushed out of the room, needing to inform Naruko and Erza about his discovery. At the entrance to the station, Erza, Naruko, and Lucy stood still, taking in the devastation around them. Numerous rune knights lay unconscious on the ground. Naruko narrowed her eyes, sensing the magical energy surrounding the station. She reached down and picked up a chunk of brick, throwing it into the air. The brick was shredded to dust almost instantly, confirming Naruko's suspicion. Wind magic. At that moment, a voice shouted from above the entrance. The Shinigami of Eisenwald, Irrigor. It seems you fairies are trapped, just like you belong, Irrigor shouted, floating in the air with his scythe. Naruko clenched her fist. You won't escape, Irrigor. Bold words from a trapped fairy, Irrigor laughed. My wind wall holds you here, and now I can finish my masterpiece. Irrigor's wind magic carried him through the sky and away from the station. Naruko-chan, we can't let him escape, Erza said. Naruko nodded, then reached up to her back, where a seal faded, revealing her katana, a gift from her dragon master Tetsu. The sword had been a constant companion throughout many tough situations. Naruko pulled the sword from its saya, the gleaming silver blade shining brightly under the sun. Erza's eyes widened in admiration. She had always admired this blade since the day a blonde savior had rescued her from slavery. Naruko charged her lightning magic, which coursed through the blade, coating it in electric energy. Erza-chan, once I break this barrier, I'm going after Irrigor. I need you to meet up with Natsu and Gray. We must inform the master about what's happening here and Eisenwald's plans. Understood? Hi, Erza replied simply. Naruko smiled, the lightning energy surrounding her growing stronger. She rushed toward the barrier, shouting the name of her attack. Reikiri. Lightning blade. A brilliant flash of light filled the area as Naruko's powerful attack collided with the barrier. But one question remained, had it worked? Dear subscribers. And with that, we come to the end of this incredible fanfic journey. It's been an amazing ride, and I'm beyond grateful for your support along the way. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. Your continued love means the world to me. Stay tuned, because this isn't the last you'll hear from me. Love you all. 6 Path Weeb.